Hi there, and welcome to this episode of The Art of Aging, which is part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. And on this show, we look at what it means to age in America and in other places around the world with positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire everyone everywhere to age with abundance. And today, I'm pleased to welcome Amanda Lazar to the show. Amanda is an assistant professor at the University of Maryland's College of Information Studies, where she directs the Health, Aging, and Technology Lab, which is conveniently an acronym, and it's that lab. So Amanda directs that lab. Amanda's work lies at the intersection of human-computer interactions and health informatics. She's a passionate supporter and user of human-centered design principles as a pathway to better solutions for all of us as we age, with specific interest in those diagnosed with cognitive impairment. So yay, human-centered design. Dr. Lazar received a PhD from the University of Washington in the Biomedical and Health Informatics program, and then went on to post-heard media. If we can just redo this paragraph here, I'm going to start with this paragraph again, 1 minute or so. 3, 2. Dr. Lazar received a PhD from the University of Washington in the Biomedical and Health Informatics program, and then went on to postdoc research in the Technology and Social Behavior program at Northwestern University. Her work has been supported by the National Science Foundation, the National Library of Medicine, and the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Amanda, thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And just a reminder that this podcast series is sponsored by United Church Homes' Ruth Frost Parker Center for Abundant Aging. To learn more about the center, including our annual symposium in October, please visit www.unitedchurchhomes.org/Parker-Center. So Amanda, I have been looking forward to this conversation, and we had a great time chatting at the A2 Collective conference in Philadelphia back in March, where I was just wowed by your presentation on human-centered design. Definitely a kindred spirit, because, we aspire to do those same things here at United Church Homes with our residents. But, how did you get involved with this? What is really driving your passion in this space?
Yeah, so I started out as an aspiring electrical engineer. That was my undergrad degree. But I became really interested in the human side of things. I wanted to understand how design could happen there. And I became interested in aging. So it started out actually as a happy accident. So I started researching with a lab in undergrad, and they happened to be doing a project with older people. And I really enjoyed it. And then I kept working with this group and still have not stopped.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And has there always been, I wonder if there was like kind of a trigger moment for you when you yourself, because, being an engineer, engaging with new solutions, design problems, development problems, and I think human-centered design has been a concept that may have always been out there, maybe by another name or so, but was there an instance in your, in your career path where you just saw it being done wrong? You saw that, or is there just something that you've just generally observed in the world when design doesn't work, when it isn't friendly? And is that something that really kind of fired you up?
I think so. I think when it comes to designing technologies for older people, you can almost see it as sometimes it feels like we're trying to take all these sensors and outfit people and know every single thing they're doing and everything they're going to do next, and basically trying to get them safely from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, right? And the things we're trying to help people do are really important. Taking medication, that is really important, right? Being safe in your home, that is really important. But it also, I think some of it comes, or a lot of it, I think, comes from a perspective of us trying to protect a different group. And I think, so in my work, I look at a lot of other research that's kind of critically reflecting on this, and also engage myself and my students in exercises to think of, well, what if someone was thinking about the kinds of things we're doing in that way, and trying to, you can kind of realize how it starts to feel a little patronizing sometimes. So trying to look at the full spectrum of things we could be doing versus the way we tend to go when we incorporate technology into working with older people. And I think that's why I really became so excited about this space, because the space of design technology for older people is because a lot of it looks a certain way, and there's so many opportunities. because of that, right? So for example, designing for kind of intergenerational knowledge exchange is something that there's so much exciting space there that we could be doing, where older people aren't just being taken care of, but they're also being, using their skills to help others, for example. Then my work in dementia, it's what I've described in aging, but 100-fold. There, we've really been thinking in very specific ways about what people with dementia, who they are and what they can do, and designing technology accordingly. So if we could get a little creative about how we think about people, spend more time with them, again, read the literature on it, that opens up the technology space quite a bit as well.
Yeah, and when you're talking about people with cognitive challenges, dementias, and so on, I mean, I keep thinking that there's a lot of misnomers about this, and that people think that there may be no hope to connect with people that are maybe in the later stages of dementia and things of that sort. And it just seems to be this this sort of conflict that we have where at what point do we think people have agency and they don't? But has your research really kind of uncovered that there is much more agency with people with dementia than people might think?
Definitely, yes. And I think what you're talking about, where people assume people with dementia can't interact, um, there's a couple places that's coming from, right? And one that's easier for me to talk about is the kind of stereotypes we as a society have. Movies you see about someone completely losing themselves, and not being able to do anything anymore, and things slowly fading, or the way that on TV they're advertising a certain medication. They say dementia patients should not be taking this medication. So there's all kinds of kind of like dehumanization, othering things that kind of just happen around. People make jokes about dementia. But I think the harder one is that a lot of people have family experiences with people who've developed dementia, right? And there I can come in and say, oh, people, with dementia, there's all these continuing abilities, but you're also coming up against this, a very real sense of loss and grief. So that being said, right, understanding that people's, these ideas about people with dementia, what they are and aren't able to do, come from places that are very understandable. At the same time, we can shift our viewpoint.
I have to ask you, if you're talking about this subject of going into this, I mean, I think that you're going into this research a layer deeper than I've seen others. I mean, I think that the insights that you have into this world of people with cognitive issues, with sort of just all the societal tropes around, this is an inevitable part of aging, that people, it's like a third rail that people don't want to talk about. But I've got to think that there must be just this is an area that you have wondered about, that fascinates you, that really does compel you. And I'm wondering if there was just a switch that was turned on as you went through your research journey, or if there was just like, what keeps you turning the pages of the book here to kind of go
Yeah.
further and further and further into this investigation.
I think that along my research journey, at the same time in my personal life, I had a family member who was starting to experience, a very beloved, very close family member, who was starting to experience symptoms of cognitive impairment along with another progressive neurodegenerative condition. So I really think for me that a lot of my work has actually been doing all this research, reading all this literature, conducting, gathering all this data, doing all this analysis, and then tying it together to say, hey, this person is still important. Yes, he was, the smartest guy I ever knew, could do everything, and now he can't do that stuff, but he's still important. He's still valuable, and he is here. And we need to sit up and accept who he is now.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about your research work right now. Just if you could describe, just sort of the body of projects, or at least the sort of I don't know if there's a central thesis that you're going after, or if there's just a number of different investigations. But if you could describe that for our audience.
I can do that. So yeah. I think, so in the journey I'm talking about, right? So that first phase of work, though, that was to say, okay, so people with cognitive impairment are still here, are still important, Well, if so much of what we value is based on, what people can do, how fast they are, how, quick they are with a witty response, um, then how can we think about things differently so that we can still see the contribution of people with dementia? So in these projects, I was working with more people with people with more advanced dementia. I did a series of projects with two amazing collaborators, Anne-Marie Piper and Caroline Dacis, and we were doing this in the context of art therapy. Caroline is an amazing art therapist. So we were looking first at the ways that art therapists worked with people with dementia, because if you've ever seen someone in art therapy or seen something come out of it, people are making these stunning, works of art, really, right? And then you look at the person who made it, and it's someone who, as we found in the research, right, other people are surprised about. They say, how can that person have done this, right? So we studied the role of the art therapist and how they're engaged in facilitating these interactions. And we found out that they do things like kind of supporting when needed and then fading in the background. So for example, guiding someone's elbow. If they're having a tremor, they'll guide their elbow when they need it. But then as soon as the person starts kind of taking off, they'll disappear back, right? All these different kinds of things that help the person, get them to the point where they can release their real talents, right? So the piece of artwork is clearly them. Each person's artwork looks different. We saw different people had different styles and really beautiful, beautiful expressions. And that is actually understanding it in that way actually is a bigger thing, because this is about who we are and what we are able to do actually has to do with the environment we're in and the social support we have. And this is everyone, right? So for me, if on the podcast I start to stumble, you're going to throw out a question that helps me get back into it, right?
Yes.
But when someone has dementia, first of all, a lot of people feel really awkward, so they don't know what to do, so they might stop, right? If someone starts to stumble or forget a word, you're like, do I throw it out there? Oh, what's happening? So no, people kind of withdraw and don't keep providing that support. But also people with dementia do have different needs. Some of their needs are different. They need different kinds of support. So studying these very skilled supporters of people with dementia was really interesting to think about. Okay, well, is there a way, could this be a model for what our technologies could do? Is there a way for technology to be kind of supportive, get people to their best place and then slip back versus, maybe taking over, for example? That was one thing we learned from our therapists. And then the other thing was about going back to this idea of like, how can we value okay, so if we're not valuing people based off of their productivity or their ability to, be super swift or, all these things that we are so of value in our society, right? A lot of our jobs are based off these things.
Right.
My job certainly is, right? Well, then is there a different kind of basis from which we can see value? So for that project, that's where these continuing abilities came in more, because we're looking at things that instead of just thinking about the things that people with dementia lose, what about the things that they maintain, right? So things like, so in art therapy, right, you're seeing these embodied interaction with material. Someone picks up a paintbrush and they can paint, right? They can have these sensory experiences with it, right? Moving it over the paper, enjoying the music while they're listening, or, participate in music. You hear a lot about that one. That's one of the, I think, more famous continuing abilities, this connection to music. Or the emotion thing. So people with dementia retain the ability to experience, our range of emotions. And another one is social. People maintain that ability to be socially connected and want to be socially connected with others. And you'll see this because sometimes if you speak with someone with advanced, moderate to advanced dementia, sometimes we focus on whether the words are making sense, but a different perspective says, oh, we're having that back and forth, right? People know when to take turns talking. People know that they're contributing to conversation, working towards a satisfying social interaction. People with dementia want to take care of other people, for example. There's a number of different ways they can do that, even without maybe having the, that same speed or productivity that others do.
Wow. Well, and I want to get to this idea of environment, because you mentioned that the environment can enable or disable productive outcomes or successful sessions. What is it about the environment that makes it that influencer, and what makes a good environment versus a bad environment if we're talking about supporting those with cognitive decline?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the answer to this comes partially from, again, almost like societal views, especially when we're thinking about technology. And I'll connect this to technology side. So I think if we think about people as robots, right? Like, I'm going to do my thing today. I'm going to go about and do the laundry and finish my task, and then, I'm done. Um, then the environment is not important, right? But if we think about how people exist in the world, and I'm getting subtle cues from the things around me, and as I'm folding, it's not just my brain saying I'm going to fold the thing, but rather, my hands know the feel. I don't do the laundry in my family. I don't know if you can tell, but my hands know the feel of this fabric, and I should be folding it like this.
Right.
Right? It's easier to think in the context of something like art, but so then you start to see how it matters, right? Or if it's okay, I'm hanging up my laundry outside, but it's actually frozen outside, right? So
Mhm.
that's not going to work. So our environment is really connected to a lot of things we do, even though I do think sometimes, as we use technology, we kind of forget about that because we feel like we're sitting at our computer, we're not really our body's not so involved, our environment's not so. But but so once we bring that back into it, right? So how um and then, okay, so there's that, but then also in terms of some of the continuing abilities I spoke about, right? A lot of them do have to do with the environment, your sense of your senses, right? A lot of that is coming from the environment around you. Um, Social interactions, that's happening in this space. Um, and when you think about some of the things that are lost again, right? Or more challenges with memory, well, we get a lot of cues from our environment, right? Not everything is
Right.
coming from my kind of crystallized memory of my name is Amanda Lazar and I do this and this and that, right? Sometimes you kind of get to go on autopilot because the things in your environment are supporting how you act. So I say those are just a couple of ways. Um, and that brings to some of the current work that I'm doing with my students. And that is where we're trying to look at the ways, not just the design on the technology itself as being the thing we have to design for, but there's a much bigger sphere of things that actually influence our ability to use technology. So, for example, I have a student, Alicia Pradhan, who's now a professor at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and she was examining things like outlet placement and how that affects where your technology can be in your house,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Of
right?
course.
And these are things that when we do user-centered design, right, we're saying, hey, let's design the most amazing technology that'll serve all your needs. But sometimes that means we leave behind those details, like where's the outlet? Things like connecting to Wi-Fi. That's become such a problem. For so many people, these kinds of things that fall outside when we think of technology design, how to do that. I think they feel very kind of mundane, are boring, or not important. But I think these are some of the biggest challenges we have when it comes to technology for aging.
This is almost like, when you're talking about human-centered design principles here, we're talking about sort of the journey mapping part of it. I mean, one of the examples that we like to use when we teach human-centered design at United Church Homes is we always go to, well, I'm Canadian, so I call them bank machines. You guys call them ATMs, but the fact that you now get if you want to take out money, you put your card in, you type in your PIN, you type in whatever you want, and then you get your card first, and then you get your cash second. But that's not how it always was. I mean, it used to be you got your cash first and your card second, and people would leave their cards in the machine all the time,
Mm.
right? So when you're talking about this whole world of not just the technology, but the plug and the Wi-Fi, it sounds to me a lot like just this sort of journey mapping exercise
Mm.
that we often find in human-centered design. Is that something that you kind of incorporate into your work?
Well, it's funny because my current PhD student, Ray Poo Hu, is exactly trying to work out how to think about this in the context of video conferencing for people
Oh, that's
with
interesting.
concerns
Yeah.
about their memory, right? Because he has been doing some studies to understand how people, and this is people we're calling with cognitive concerns.
Hmm.
And we could talk about that if that's interesting, but dementia is such a stigmatizing word, and not everyone has a diagnosis of dementia. And whether someone has a medical diagnosis, how much does that matter versus kind of the symptoms they're experiencing for technology design? But that's a whole other topic. So, anyways, in his research, um, he found things like people were using the calendar, right? The digital calendar was actually a very important part of preparing for a Zoom call, or the link someone sends you in an email, right? So he and people would write themselves notes to remember to get on a call at certain times. And so to have a successful video conferencing experience, there's actually all these kinds of backstage work that go into it. So he did an analysis of this, thinking of this in terms of almost like a theater performance, right? Using thinking about the front stage and the backstage work, which led him find all these things that are happening in the background, which was really
Oh,
interesting.
that's a really interesting framework to kind of describe that, and that's actually very cool. Kind of reminds me of
Yeah.
Disney and the way that they kind of do the whole hospitality view, and it's a whole thing. But that's actually to actually bring that in. That strikes me. That's very cool.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. And then so that led him to this next part, which is like what you're talking, this kind of like journey mapping of like, okay, so he got these little glimpses into this background work people are doing. Well, okay, so now how do you more kind of systematically understand what people are doing? Because he also found things like different device characteristics matter. So someone, for some calls, a phone was okay, right? But for other calls, they really needed their laptop or something like that. Or like, you know, this device was really old and lagging, and but it was better for this, right? So these trade-offs people are making, these different things in their environment are all a part of it. So if we're just designing, because when I first started working in the space, I was like, okay, how do we design a video conferencing application that's more accessible for people with dementia? So I thought, well, I already had learned from all the years of work, like, don't necessarily try and design something new. If people are using something well, let's design around that. So I thought, okay, for example, the Zoom interface. Well, do people understand the buttons? Maybe those need, different words on them because they're not accessible. Maybe people don't understand what mute means, or it needs to get bigger. But what Rape helped uncover is like the process, the use of a technology isn't just about that moment with the interface, which is what user-centered design is so good at, but it is about this kind of bigger picture. So how can we understand what's going on there, especially given that these are, almost like intimate experiences in your house that you have, the night before you're scrolling through your phone in bed, maybe looking at the video conferencing activities you have the day above, right? The next day. So how do you study this? How do you understand this? And then how can we then use that to make more accessible, whether technology or technology routines, right? That's to be determined where exactly the area for intervention is.
Yeah, what's a highlight and what's a low light in that whole experience, and how do you kind of turn those low lights into the highlights? You imagine somebody looking at your phone the night before I got this call, and then suddenly the whole day is kind of designed, or that cues, or that the expectations that you have by prior experience using the technology kind of create a mood. I mean, I think that it's when we sort of study the decision making, in our world, we're doing a really cool project right now around decision making. Mm-hmm. It's like any experience that connotes or that creates a negative emotion automatically makes that decision complex. So it's an interesting kind of intersection between just positive and negative emotion, and then the whole kind of like handshake people have with technologies. And if that one technology, I mean, if you're having an important telehealth call, your provider, and you need to make decisions on that call, if the technology, is a disabler to your achievement of that call, then you get negative emotion. Then suddenly those medical decisions are kind of more complex, right? And that must show up like extra when we're talking about people with cognitive challenges.
Definitely, yeah. And people talked about kind of high stakes situations like doing kind of financial planning. They had kind of set it up in a way that they're able to continue engaging in their financial planning. That's pretty high stakes, right? Or, attending funerals, attending kind of continuing their professional lives in a sense by, kind of one person talked about continuing to, like medical discussions about, how the field of medicine, should respond to current things and things like that. And people talked about feeling sometimes like they were just futzing around, and like the young generation was able to know everything so fast, so well on these video conferencing platforms. So yeah, the stakes are high sometimes.
The stakes are high. But you know what I'm also thinking about, Amanda? I remember the very first, I mean, I've always loved design. I've been a design geek, for ages. I wanted to be an industrial designer when I was a kid. I did all of the things. And there's a great documentary, I think it's called Objectified. And it was one of the first documentaries I really saw that really sort of clued me in that there was something called human-centered design out there. And I remember there's one scene they did a lot of work at IDEO. And for listeners, IDEO, the design lab that creates like the OXO good grips and cool things like that. And they were designing a pair of garden shears, like hedge clippers, and they were designing it for maintenance, like people who are landscapers, like somebody who would be using those garden shears an hour a day versus, let's say, you or I that might be using it for an hour a week or once every couple of weeks, right? But they were saying that because they were designing for kind of the more extreme user, then the middle kind of takes care of itself, you know? And I'm thinking about your work and kind of like everything that you're doing to kind of map out human-centered solutions for people with, cognitive concerns. And I'm wondering if you have a feeling that it's kind of maybe the same situation here, that if you design experiences for people, or I guess the question might be, in what kind of maybe situations, or can you see an example of if we design this experience for somebody with a cognitive concern and we optimize to that, is there kind of a follow-on or a cascade down to people that may not have cognitive concerns? Kind of like how curb cuts are designed for people with wheelchairs, but if I have a roller bag, I can also use that curb, or a stroller, then I can use that curb cut as well. I mean, do you see any inspiration, or at least a translation of the work that you're doing for people with cognitive concern to the majority of the population that may not have cognitive concern?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I definitely think so. For a long time, I've been saying that people with dementia are kind of the best usability testers, because sometimes there might be a usability issue, something that is in the wrong place, could be in a better place, or unclear, and you might pause for a moment but figure it out. So I think the things that sometimes people can overcome, even if it is taking cognitive load, could stop someone with dementia kind of in their tracks, and they won't, it bars their use, it stops their use. So, but these are things that could be better designed. So I definitely think in a lot of cases, that's true. And then the other thing that's relevant here is dementia, we so often think of as a cognitive condition. But, it actually often involves a lot of different components. So it can involve, sensory. There's a lot of sensory changes that people can experience. And there's also a lot of sensory experiences that people in general experience as they age. And there's a lot of, sensory disabilities that people have all across age ranges in the population. So in some of our work that Emma Dixon has led, now professor at Clemson, she's talked about how different accessibility features, for example, for blind or low vision users, might be really useful as well for people with dementia. So we can learn or benefit from things that different communities with disabilities, have found, in addition to also, I think, what we fix to make things more usable for people with dementia could make them much better for everyone. And here I'm talking more about, mild dementia, moderate dementia. I think when we talk about technologies for advanced dementia, I think there's absolutely technologies people can use. Often at that point, we start designing for the caregiver, for passive use. I think any kind of human need that we have, that we satisfy with technology, for people without dementia, we could think about that in advanced dementia as well. It'll just look really different.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's almost even like how people touch and feel. I do get your point about sensory. I know that there's, I've read that, in advanced dementia, they may be more sensitive to touch, or they may be more sensitive to, auditory stimulation and things like that. So that opens up sort of like a whole new world. I mean, there's so many different factors that you sort of think about. I mean, in general, I mean, I think one of my, I'm going to quote my buddy Victor Wang again, who was talking about AI and use in age tech and talking about, and I'm going to put the AI question to you as well, Amanda, because we did meet at the A2I conference, which is all about AI and its promise for aging and longevity. But you think about all the different factors that influence somebody's wellness, and let's say if you're a cardiologist, like you're the expert on the heart. You know everything about the heart. And if you're in geriatrics, quite frankly, you know everything about complexity, because the factors that lead to wellness, they could be financial, they could be functional, they could be cognitive, they could be emotional, they could be clinical, all of these different things. And then when we think about AI, we think about AI as maybe something that could naturally make sense of these things. And I think I said to you, even off the top of the call, I'm kind of getting sick a little bit of the AI conversation because, we may have just hit a ceiling in terms of what it can do. Maybe the wow factor is kind of, I don't know, just sort of settled a little bit. But all that being said, where do you think is the best application for AI technology as it exists today within designing support for people with cognitive challenges? Or what sort of curiosities do you have about AI, just in any aspect of aging or longevity that you would want to unpack a little bit more?
Yeah, I think some of the questions I'm the most interested in now are the ones where, if AI can fix this part of things, let's say, right? Well, where does a human still have to interact with the thing?
Mhm.
Does the thing have to be plugged in? Does the thing have to be, speak to someone, or does the person speak to it? And how do they log in, get into that application? And right, so it's like we have all these edges around things that, again, I don't think we have current elegant ways of designing for or talking about or thinking about as technology. But now when technology is so woven into our world, well, the things it's woven into matter quite a bit too. And now we have to include those into so in other words, right? So we often are looking for technology for so long. Technology has been framed as this thing that's going to ameliorate the aging crisis, the lack of caregivers, right? The growing population. Um, but that that idea means that sometimes we're forgetting the work it takes to make technology work, or we're saying we're downplaying it. But then
Mhm.
you see things like, people are studying the work that caregivers have to do in getting the technology to work. I keep talking about plugging in, but that's a pretty big one. If I design this amazing medical device that will know, you just have to wear it, and then it's going to let us know if you've fallen, if you've wandered, if you're having an incident, that are you
Yeah.
going to remember to take it off?
Are you going to charge it,
Are you
right?
going to charge it? And if not,
Yeah.
or is someone going to find it stigmatizing? So they will kind of put it off to the side on their dresser, and you'll say, "Hey, are you wearing that thing?" They'll say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." Or they'll just wear it, when they go out or something. But at home is the time they most need it. Or, so um, right. So I guess I'm interested in our exciting visions of technology. We are. I'm interested in things in the shadows of
Yeah.
those exciting visions. And I think we
Yeah.
need people studying both, right? I don't think that means, yeah, this isn't to say people should be studying those exciting applications for technology, but I like to come along and kick around in the shadows and say, well, what does it mean that this is happening? And, you know, can we really leave that out, or do we need to start thinking about that too?
I thought you would tell me that AI is this magical silver bullet that's going to just solve everything, but you're right. I mean, I think that, and I think we see that in a lot in our work. Especially in community housing, what have you. But people have no time now. You have this new thing that comes around. Now there's this. Now there's that, and everyone's still getting over COVID. And yeah, the idea that you can just sort of plug and play something is just a real huge misnomer. Especially in our industry where people are just every consumable minute of their time is spent doing stuff. And how do you break that in? It's almost like I always say I kind of have like three measures of ROI. One is kind of the traditional one of like time saved or extra revenue. And then the second one is kind of more of the sizing up of our problems or opportunities to begin with. We don't have enough of that. So somebody tells me I can solve my problem. Well, is this problem number 1, 2, 3, or is it problem number 36, right? But then I always like to say that the third ROI is if you take this away from me, I'll kill you. What that means is that trusting our team that does frontline work, if I give them something and they say, no, if you take this away from me, I'll kill you, then we know that it's easy and it works. And I've already in dementia, I think the most successful element of that is intuition robotics and no, or is it no? It's ageless innovation, and their pets, the robotic pets. And I don't know how much those allow people to get better sleep. I don't know by how much they reduce agitation. I just know that my staff for 150 bucks a throw, it's like, no, don't take these away from us, right? Because things are just obvious. They obviously work. The frustrating thing is that, when we do kind of unbox and try new technologies, though, frequently it just doesn't work right out of the box, and they need that user interaction. And I can't be somebody's pilot site at that point for it. So I guess that if you had to give an aspiring technology developer a piece of advice about designing for the senior world, and at least if you take a look at sort of what you see working or what you see don't working, is there any big absolutely do this, or is there any big like absolutely don't do that, when we talk about actually bringing a solution out into the world where real human beings are going to use it?
I think the way I think about technology is like, it's gonna come. The thing that's gonna come is gonna come, and then we'll have to adjust to it because we're gonna have to use it, right? Or people will start using it, and then So, for example, there's digitization initiatives, around the world. You can see where people aren't using cash and now they're using, their phones to pay for things, and I mean, we do that here, but as the only option. So if I was advising like policy people, should we be doing that? Well, then I'd say, hey, what about we need to think about all these groups who this might become inaccessible to. But if someone's coming to me and saying, hey, I want to design a new app for, I guess I would say, I mean, for me, I have almost like a list of real needs I see. They don't all require a new technology being designed. Sometimes it might be an add-on to an existing system, but I have like my uses that I think are use cases that I think are really underexplored.
Tell us about what use cases do you think are underexplored?
Yeah, well, I think so. One, this is what I tell a lot of AI people when they come saying, "Hey, what can we do with AI in the context of dementia?" I think that not only detecting the negative stuff. Everyone wants to detect agitation, BPSDs, right? The kind of these negative symptoms, but there's engagement is another one that I think is really interesting, right? Like, I want to know if this technology, for example, in my PhD work, I went into a memory care unit and I brought this device from a company, and we evaluated. We saw were people liking it. So, we would play with a puzzle thing, and I sat there and take notes. And I brought in, there are these validated measures where for observing people with dementia to understand, right? Because your verbal is affected, right? You're not going to be able to say, I'm having a great time. I mean, you could, but it's not the same, in the moment. It might be harder to do that while doing something else. And then if I ask you 2 hours later, you might not remember the exact specifics of 2 hours ago. So observation is a really good one there. And so you have this checkbox of like, is the person leaning forward? Are they smiling? Are they doing it right? So you sit there and observe. But as one resource, that's a lot of resources to be able to do that. But imagine if I could know, how much tailoring we could do, for example, of things. If we knew if someone was enjoying themselves and engaged. And, since we know that communication, that verbal communication is more challenging. So I think there again, just like that's the same trend as the stuff I was talking about before, right? Instead of just seeing it as such a negative condition that we need to fix or remedy, there's real losses, there's real, hardships, of course, with dementia, but there's also a lot of stuff that, people can do, people are excited about. So designing there. And then in terms of aging, also, I think thinking about what we are losing when we're not valuing older people in our society, and how we might roll that back a little bit and be able to capture some of that. So for a long time, I had this dream project of kind of figuring out how to capture people's, embodied interactions and then show younger people that. So for example, I was in Chicago at the time doing a postdoc, and there was my older cousin brought me to this skilled like leather fixer kind of person, right? She would get her bag repaired, her leather bag repaired. And these are very, these skills are not ones you can verbally describe necessarily, but you can imagine all, worn or sensor technologies, things that could capture this and then help transmit it to others, whether with that person there too, teaching them or not. So the closest we got is my foreign PhD student, Teja Madali, did a project in the context of gardening. So thinking of what context to capture, where we have older gardeners, for example, mentoring younger gardeners that aren't necessarily co-located, right? Because gardening is, again, and this wasn't people with dementia, but still these, I guess, across these, I'm interested in more, these embodied and sensory and things that you can't just get to with our words.
I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. And what I really love is that you really are turning a very hopeful picture on this. It's sort of like, it's glass half full, not a glass half empty. But just I think that this is research that we need in the world. I'm so happy that you've taken a few moments to share that with us. But you're not off the hook yet, Amanda. We do always ask our guests 3 questions about their own personal experience with aging. And do you feel comfortable enough for me just to try these questions with you?
Yeah.
Okay. But first, tell us where people can find you. How can they find out more about your research, your work?
Yes. Yeah, so you could read about my lab's research at thatlab.umd.edu, or you could find my website on amandalazar.net.
amandalazar.net. Perfect,
Yes.
perfect, perfect. Okay, so Amanda, question number 1 for you. When you think about how you've aged, when you think about how you've aged, you personally, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
So it's a work in progress, but definitely softening a bit. So, it's easy for me to go to these kind of like rigid, ways of thinking about, this is how you should act, this is what you should do. This is how, so I, I guess just like how I opened up talking about, outfitting older people's sensors and getting them from one point to another. Sometimes I'll think about my day and, even on vacation day, it's like, okay, I'm going to exercise, then I'm going to cook, and then I'm going to, clean every room of the house. So trying to move away from that to a more, open, softer place.
That's no, I feel you. Believe me, I do.
I got that from your laugh. I'm like, this resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every moment of time must be filled with a project, and yeah, I'm trying to get to that place as well.
Yeah, but I've definitely been making some progress as I age, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
Versus when I was younger and made a summer camp schedule for my little brother. I guess my mom asked me to pay me to babysit him or something. And I look back at the schedule and it's like, 8 to 8:02 break, and then 8:02 to 8:15 spelling practice. It was really, really frightening.
Wait, spelling like the rowboats, the rowing spelling practice?
Oh no, spelling practice.
Oh, spelling practice. Okay, I misheard you. Okay, all right, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But here's question number 2 for you. All right, what has surprised you the most about you as you've aged?
I've developed a very intense hobby around gardening, very intense. I know the names of, native plants in my area, and I think about them a lot. So yeah, I guess I didn't realize that I could develop an entire new, very deep hobby out of scratch.
Yeah, but that's also really inspiring because I think a lot of people don't think that way. I mean, I know in my mind, I want to learn how to cook. I want to learn how to do a different language. I want to do all of these different things. And, but where do you start? So hearing stories about you sort of picking this up and really finding that passion, that's very inspiring.
Yeah.
But speaking about inspiring, I also want to say, the third question is there someone that you've met or been in your life that you think has set a good example for you in aging, like someone that has inspired you to age with abundance, or looking at someone that might be older than you are? Oh, I want to be that person when I grow up. Does anything come to mind?
Oh yeah, so many people. It's hard to describe. I mean, so many people. I think for me, most people, if you pause, and give a little space, you can kind of take in what's the word? It's like I guess the magnificence of, humankind, not to get sappy, but it's true, right? When you're talking to anyone, but in this context, like older people, right? Just the way that people have, developed their personalities and their perspectives and their unique interests and their ways of thinking about things. If I can slow down a little, I can take it in. And of course I have, my favorites, but and Lillian, you were the best. Yeah, Lillian was the best. Yeah, she taught me to sew. Yeah. But I don't want to, you know what I mean? She was so fun and so stylish and so cool. But it's like, but even the people who, are not so stylish, I think that's cool too. It's hard to explain the perspective that
Well,
I'm
yeah,
expressing, but
I
it's
guess
like,
there's things that people carry with them and choose to carry with them
yeah,
over their lifespans, and I think
yeah,
that you sort of recognize those things because you work with so many people that may be older than yourself, and it's kind
yeah,
of interesting to kind of notice, people whose careers may be they may still identify as that person. Like we have a wonderful lady at one of our locations that leads exercise classes, and she's 102,
yeah,
and she was, it wasn't that she was a gym teacher, but she was in her career, but she is a gym teacher. So just seeing
yeah.
these
Oh,
through
yeah,
lines of what people carry with them, and it's a great gift, and I'm so
yeah,
glad that you noticed that with so many different
yeah.
people.
I mean, we have people on our research team too, like, a retired professor, but she's still, yeah, she was diagnosed with like a rare, slow moving form of dementia, more than a decade ago. And she's working on our team. She mentors students. She helps us with analysis. We have another, um, she's an advanced grad student on our team. She takes, classes at UMD, and we're doing a project where she's reflecting on her own experience as an older woman, giving tech support to her peers, and we're reflecting on our experience together. So yeah, there's a lot of value there.
And you get to notice those things. That's so great. Well, Amanda, I really just appreciate you giving us the time and being such a terrific guest on the show. I mean, I think you've opened our eyes up to a lot of new ways of thinking and possibilities that we may not. I mean, I know it has been for me, so I very much enjoyed it. So thank you for that, and most of all, thank you to our listeners. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of The Art of Aging, which is part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. And we want to hear from you. I mean, are you a dementia caregiver? Are you someone that is support? Do you have a? Are you somebody that has a cognitive challenge that may have an opinion on the types of solutions that are designed for you? I mean, where do you find your voice? How would you like to contribute? Please tell us about this at abundantagingpodcast.com. And then you can also give us feedback when you visit the Ruth Frost Parker website at www.unitedchurchhomes.org/Parker-Center. And once more, Amanda, where can people find you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, so I'm at amandalazar.net, and you can read about my work at my lab at thatlab.umd.edu.
Terrific. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.